It's a beautiful, calm, warm evening in England's mountains green at the height of British summertime, far away from any urban interference or modern civilization. There's a cool, gentle breeze whispering through the trees, the lush green grass stemming from the rich, earthy soil beneath, the sounds of wildlife, and the glowing orange sun setting beyond the horizon. On the surface, everything seems calm, peaceful, tranquil. But there's something else in the air. Something off. Something dark beneath the surface. All around there's a sense of history, something old which still somehow lingers on. The soil is rich with memories of times past, ancient traditions, festivities, old religions, beliefs, superstitions, macabre sacrificial rituals, and an overpowering stench of death. Of all the subgenres of horror, folk horror seems for some reason to be the most difficult one to define. This could be due to the fact that even though some of the films within it are 50 years old, the term folk horror and its definitions weren't really popularised until long after the fact. But it may also be to do with the fact that, unlike slashers or ghost movies which have particular rules and conventions, folk horror is more about a mood, an aesthetic, a soundscape. It's hard to know exactly what a folk horror is, but you know it when you see it.
Oh God! Oh Jesus Christ!
Primarily, folk horror was a label that was applied to 3 specific movies released in the early 1970s, which all shared an obsession with the British landscape, folklore, and superstition. But since then, academics and scholars and cinephiles have begun widening the net and looking beyond the obvious titles to what else might constitute folk horror. Over the next few weeks, I aim to take a closer look at this strange and interesting subgenre which to this day is still evolving. I'll be looking at traditional British rural horror from the 60s and 70s, both on the big screen and the small screen. I'll then be branching out to international examples, from movies set in medieval Japan to dark Swedish folk horror from director Ingmar Bergman, and exploring where a country as modern as America sits within the folk horror mould, by looking at movies labelled as Southern Gothic and Hicksploitation. I'll then be looking at recent titles in the 21st century from directors like Ben Wheatley that seem to have returned to this folk horror tradition, and try and unpick exactly why it is we seem to be in the midst of a folk horror revival. Finally, I'll be trying to figure out exactly what it is about rural landscapes, ancient traditions, and isolated communities that inherently frightens us so much. Join me as we begin our journey through the evolution of folk horror. Welcome back to the Evolution of Horror. My name is Mike, and as ever, I am your host. If you're joining us for the first time, then welcome. In this podcast, we explore and dissect the evolution of the horror genre by looking at particular subgenres across a number of weeks. Now, previously to this, we explored the evolution of the slasher movie across 15 weeks, and after that, we looked at the evolution of the ghost story across 20 weeks. And now, this is part 1 of a brand new series in which, as the intro suggested, we will be looking at the evolution of folk horror. We've got a lot to get through this week, so I'm going to get started shortly. But first of all, here are a few contact details if you want to get in touch with us. The email address is evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. Don't forget you can find us on Twitter @evolutionpod or on Facebook. That's facebook.com/evolutionofhorror. You can also subscribe to us on Letterboxd. We're there under @evolutionpod, and that's where you can keep up to date with a list of ever-growing movies that we're going to be covering in spoilerific detail this series. Now, later on in this episode, I'm going to be chatting to Richard Wells about all things folk horror as we sort of delve into a little bit of an introduction to the series, explore what the term means, and generally how these kind of folk horror movies have changed and evolved over the years. But first of all, I'm very excited to introduce a very special guest. She's somebody who I've been a huge fan of for a very, very long time. Alice Lowe began her career as an actress in television and comedy. She was one of the stars of the brilliant, dark, twisted cult comedy hit Garth Marenghi's Dark Place from 2004, and since then made appearances in other great British comedies, including The Mighty Boosh, Horrible Histories, and Edgar Wright's Hot Fuzz. But it was in 2012 that she starred in Ben Wheatley's Sightseers, a movie that she wrote alongside Steve Oram about a couple who travel around the English countryside brutally murdering people, a sort of Bonnie and Clyde meets Mike Leigh's The Nuts in May, which also happens to fit pretty perfectly in the folk horror mould. Since then, she's gone from strength to strength and very recently wrote, directed and starred in her debut feature, a genre movie about a pregnant woman on a killing spree called PREVENGE, which she actually filmed in 2 weeks when she was 8 months pregnant. And very recently, she also starred in an audiobook adaptation of the original folk horror itself, The Blood on Satan's Claw, which she starred in alongside Mark Gatiss and Reece Shearsmith. She's got a bunch of other really interesting projects in the pipeline, and I got to sit down and chat about her career and all things folk horror. So here is my chat with the brilliant Alice Lowe. Well, Alice, welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
Hello. So first of all, obviously most people out there probably are aware of you and what you've done, but tell me a little bit about yourself and kind of what you're doing and what you're up to at the moment.
So I'm a actor turned writer director, I guess, and I've done a bit of telly, but I'm doing more feature films now, which is really exciting because it's something that I always wanted to do and kind of thought it was a intangible dream, and now I'm doing it, so
amazing.
I feel very lucky indeed.
Yeah, and a couple of years ago you had your directorial debut PREVENGE,
yes,
which you wrote, directed and starred in, and you were filming it when you were, is it 6 months pregnant?
I
was
was
that right?
7.5 to 8.5 months pregnant when we were filming. We filmed it over 11. It was only an 11-day shoot, but that was over a period of a couple of weeks. So actually, the shoot, people talk about the shoot as like, wow, that must have been hard. But actually, the shoot felt for me really lovely. I really enjoyed it. It was, I think, the thing that I look back on and go, oh my God, how did I do that? Was having a newborn baby and promoting the film. That was much harder.
Yeah.
Because. So actually she wasn't newborn, but when she was newborn I was doing the edit and the post-production and all that sort of stuff with the help of a lot of people obviously, and then when the film came out, my daughter was about 6 months old when it premiered in Venice, so I took her with me and then I just kept on travelling pretty much around the world to various festivals, but took my daughter with me, and I look back on that and go, oh my God, like that would tire anyone, but taking a sort of baby with you, that was sort of, I do look back and go, that was quite crazy.
Incredibly impressive. Yeah, amazing. I mean, I suppose it's one of those things where at the time you almost don't let yourself get too exhausted until sort of after the fact, and then go,
I mean, I just got on with it really. I don't think I really realised how tired I was, and actually there's no better time. I think doing that with like a young baby who's not crawling is actually easier than my daughter now, who needs a lot of stimulation and likes to run around and blah blah blah.
They just eat and sleep at that age.
Yeah, exactly, and poo.
And poo,
so
exactly.
That it actually, and they're very portable, even though it's extremely heavy and tiring. But it's possible. So actually, the timing worked out pretty well. Yeah.
So because I remember you saying basically the opportunity came along and you kind of had to take it there and then, didn't you? And then the story was kind of fashioned around the situation that you were in, being pregnant. Is that right? Yeah,
because I'd been trying to get feature off the ground for a bit. And when I got pregnant, I just thought, well, that's it. I'm probably not going to direct films now. I just couldn't see my way around it. And then I got offered an opportunity, like, we've got a bit of money, privately financed film, what do you want to do? And it was pretty much blank slate to do whatever I wanted to do.
Amazing.
I was just like, why has this happened now?
After all these years of
exactly. But actually I think sometimes that is the way things work out for the best. It's like that your best laid plans do not, that's not the thing that goes. It's like, when you're freelance and you're developing projects, I think you have about 10 on the go at any one time just to survive. And the one that you don't think is going to go is always the one that goes. It's really weird that way. So I was kind of telling people, people would see me and go, oh, so what's your plans for the pregnancy? You're going to take some time off, blah, blah. And I was like, I'm making a feature film. And then but I'd sort of say, but don't worry about it, it's not going to happen. I just thought something was going to happen to mean that it wasn't, because you're so used to planning for things that aren't going to happen in the TV industry, the film industry. You invest so much energy into a project and then it doesn't get green lit. And you just get really used to it being that way. And I think that's what I expected. I was like, something will come along to stop it from happening.
It's so fun. It's funny you saying that the shoot itself wasn't too bad, because I had Jen Handorf on the podcast, who's obviously produced it. She was saying there were moments when her heart was kind of racing, like moments when you're sort of walking through Cardiff sort of high streets and there are people everywhere.
Yes.
And she was going, oh my God, what if people think that you're not actually pregnant, or that it's a costume and do something or approach you? Well,
another producer, Vaughan, was quite, because he knows Cardiff quite well. I mean, I knew that there's a sort of quite a drinking culture there, and it was a Saturday night, and it was Halloween.
Yes.
So he was like, we're going to get a bounce, we're going to get security. And I was like, don't be stupid, no one's going to do anything to me.
No, you have to,
And actually, it was sort of necessary, because people thought it was like a challenge to them that I was dressed up in this scary costume, and they were almost like, I'm not scared of you, like getting in my face, like. And I was like, oh my God. I did have to say to one guy, I am actually pregnant. I sort of saw a bit of confusion in his face.
It's really scary. Yeah. And I suppose the thing is, if you're going to be surrounded by a crew and a camera, and then you have security as well, you are going to attract attention, aren't you? That's the problem.
Yeah. And I don't know, it was like it was only about 8:30, but people were already, it was like they'd been drinking all day. Yeah. So it was quite interesting. I mean, we sort of got some amazing stuff. I'm really glad we did it that way, but by the time, I think we filmed for about an hour, and I was like, we've got enough, let's get out of here.
Yeah, exactly. Incredible sequences though around that. It reminded me a bit of things like Under the Skin and stuff, where it feels so real, like you are just kind of there and amongst the real people.
Well, I just kind of felt like a friend of mine said to me, who's one of my collaborators, he's sort of a script editor for me, and he'd sort of read the script, and he was like, I think Halloween's a bit of a cliche for a horror film. And I was like, well, the thing that's going to make it not a cliche is if it's real, because you wouldn't make up those Halloween costumes.
No.
Like, it had to be. And I was inspired by Under the Skin. I loved that technique of kind of mixing real footage with, and I think it just puts you in danger. It just puts you in the atmosphere of that space.
It does. Puts you on edge in a different kind of way.
Yeah. So I just kind of thought, if we can pull that off, it's just going to add a whole other dimension to the film. And I was just it's still one of my favourite bits in the whole film.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And it's so funny, because it is a realistic depiction of what I feel like is British Halloween compared to, American Halloween. It's very much kind of, you think of films like Halloween with lots of cute kids trick-or-treating with their parents and stuff. And it's kind of all kind of nice, happy decorations everywhere, whereas really it's just an excuse for adults to get pissed, isn't it? In Britain, Halloween, and
wear some very short dresses.
Exactly.
Being a sexy witch or whatever. But it was, I had been in Cardiff for Halloween before, and I had because it's got a big student population. Massively. And stuff, so
Tiger £1 shots and all that.
Exactly. Well, I've been there. I have actually, about 10 years ago, I was in Tiger for Halloween.
Me too. It's great fun.
We might have been there at the same time. They had lots of fake cobwebs everywhere.
Yes, exactly.
But, so I'd sort of, but I was kind of worried that it wouldn't live up to my memories. I was sort of like, well, I know it gets a bit crazy, but maybe it won't be that interesting. And then we got there at like 8:00 to the town centre, and we're like, oh my God. It's like literally bedlam.
Totally. And one of the things, because obviously you predominantly come from a comedy background, it seems, but a lot of the projects you've done, including Prevenge obviously and Sightseers, and even other things you've appeared in, have a lot of elements of horror to them, and they have this kind of dark underpinning, even things like Garth Marenghi or even Hot Fuzz and all these other like that's and how much of that was kind of coincidence, especially in terms of just the things you were cast in, and how much of a horror fan are you?
It's really interesting. I mean, I've always been a massive horror fan, but it's not something I particularly thought I was going to make my career out of. Do you know what I mean? And the same with comedy, actually. I grew up watching all the weirdest comedy that I could find, all of the weirdest films that would be on late at night on BBC Two or Channel 4. And I just grew up, my mum and dad were worried that I watched too much TV because I just was obsessive TV watcher, basically.
Yeah.
But it was back in the day when they used to show a lot more films on TV as well. I don't know, really. I mean, when I think about, I used to do devised shows with Paul King, and I would not say that they were horror per se, but they were sort of physical theatre type things. But I look back and we were telling ghost stories, and we were like doing stuff that was spooky as well as funny. And I don't know genre is just so fashionable now, and it's one of those things that you kind of go, but I always liked it, so I don't know.
Before it was cool,
yeah. And I don't know. I just think I love metaphor. I love fairy tales. I love dark fairy tales. I love anything that's surrealist or fantasy or sci-fi or anything that's where there's a metaphorical, symbolic narrative that kind of takes you out of the ordinary world. So to me, I don't confine myself to horror. I kind of go, I know whether I like it or not, and what interests me or doesn't interest me. And I may do sort of I may write a straight-ish drama, but I'm interested in the mind and the kind of and nightmares and the tricks that the mind plays on us. I don't think, I'm not that interested in representing reality per se, because what is reality anyway? We're all living in a subjective fantasy, basically, of what we think the world is.
Absolutely.
I just think there's no better way to show that than with film, really.
And do you see Prevenge as a horror movie, do you think?
Well, I mean, I didn't go out my way to write a horror movie. I kind of the beginning model was a revenge movie, really. But I knew it was going to have horror elements. And I mean, one of the brilliant things about doing something like Sightseers is it really opened my mind to the horror network and the horror audience that are out there to be tapped into, that if your film fulfills enough criteria, you can show it at Sitges, you can show it at Fright Fest. So I think definitely I had, one eye on that prize in that sense. I mean, you always have to have one foot in creativity and the other in practicality, I think. And I kind of, any of my projects, I kind of feel like, where's this going to go? Where's its home going to be? And if I can't see that there's an audience for it, it's not necessarily going to go. So, I mean, it's funny that, I'm very audience focused. People often sort of think, oh yeah, you do cult stuff, you do cult, just it's niche or whatever. And I'm like, no, I'm more of a populist than that. I've been a live performer for a long time. And to me, the audience is paramount.
It's getting the numbers in.
Well, not just the numbers, but the reaction. You want to be pleasing people or entertaining them or amusing them or get whatever reaction from them. You're getting a reaction from them. So I'm always interested in the audience. When I'm looking at the edit, I'm like, what are the audience feeling? How are they reacting to this? So, I think I was sort of probably a bit more populist than what someone might
well, it's interesting because I mean, it's quite a tricky thing to get right, isn't it? Tonally, comedy and horror sort of together, I think. And it's done so well at Prevenge and Sightseers as well. But, Sightseers, was that like a big, I'm kind of going backwards really here through your career, but was that like a big kind of changing point for you? Did that kind of open more doors, the success of that?
It did, but not as much as I thought it was going to, actually. I have to admit, I was kind of like, I think we knew it would be a big leap for us, just me and Steve, getting to make our own feature film. It was like there were plenty of much more established comedians that don't get to do that. Because we were nobodies really, we'd done sort of, I remember actually a Time Out review saying that about us, that it was like bit part TV players for some reason.
Those guys you've seen in the background a few times.
Yeah, exactly. Like, who the hell are they? Why do they get to do this? And I was a bit like, fair enough, like I'd get sort of people coming up to me going, how did you get that film made? And really, I mean, it was Ben Wheatley coming on board that, made it turn a corner in terms of getting it green lit.
It's really interesting though, because it feels also like a bit of a turning a corner for Ben too. I mean, before then, obviously Down Terrace and Kill List were these huge sort of cult hits, but it felt again like Sightseers was the thing that pushed him into the mainstream really as well.
Yeah,
so
I think it did really well.
Perfect collaboration.
Not that I see any of the money out of it, but financially, I think it did. I think it did really well. It did really well for Studio Canal and stuff. So it was, for what it was made, I think it was deemed a real success. So. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, for him, it's so interesting. I think you need consolidation. It's not. I say this to some of my friends who, you know, you get to a point where you're like, why aren't I getting enough roles? And after Sightseers, I got no acting work whatsoever. I was basically unemployed for about 2 years, and I was terrified. And I think it is that weird thing. I remember like someone like Claire Danes talking about this. Like she got a Golden Globe for something,
one of many things.
And then the phone didn't ring for like 2 years, and it was like people either assumed she was busy or that she was.
Yeah, it doesn't happen like the dream, you know, the fantasy.
No, and it's really weird. It's almost like, well done, you've done it. You can go away now. Yeah. You can curl up and die. And anyway, so and maybe it was my age as well, because, you know, I was at that sort of horrific age for an actress where people are, you know, deciding whether you're
young or old.
Yes, exactly. And so, yeah, I really didn't get any work. And then after, you know, I got the odd bit in there, but I had to really hustle for it. And then, you know, I sort of actually got pregnant because I was a bit like, well, I'm not doing anything else. Keep getting auditions to play like mothers. So, you know, and like, without being one.
Yeah.
That's not why I did it.
Yeah.
To get more work.
I might as well.
I was actually, you know, I was a bit like, well, what else am I doing? If I was ever going to have kids, now is the time to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was actually PREVENGE that really consolidated things. I think it's sort of, you have to kind of, you can never rest in this industry. You have to work your arse off. And I don't know if that's true as an actress as well, rather than being an actor. Because I've often witnessed that the men that I work with get many, many more opportunities than I get. And I'm there going, what's wrong with me?
Yeah,
you know,
I'm still here.
Hello,
yeah.
I'm still here. And but I feel like PREVENGE has made everything turn a massive corner for me in terms of my career. Like, I'm getting film roles now. I'm getting offered to direct incredible things that actually I'm turning down because I'm a bit like, I don't know how I can be an actress and a mum and make my own film.
Something like that.
Yeah. And something's got to give. But yeah, it's a really nice position to be in because I feel like the hard work has paid off at last. You know, but it's taken quite a while.
Dear Mum, Yorkshire is lovely, not like you said at all. They can smile, and they do sell my pasta sauce. The caravan bed is quite short, but Chris is a sensitive lover.
I mean, you and Steve obviously had these characters already for a long time, hadn't you, before Sightseers and the making of Sightseers. I mean, how much of that, because it always feels like with Ben's films that they have an element of everything feels so immediate and almost, not improv, but almost unscripted in that kind of Mike Leigh fashion or something. How much of that, you know, came from you two just, you know, knowing these characters so well and sort of living and breathing them?
Well, Ben uses a technique which I like to use as well, which is a kind of Armando Iannucci technique where you kind of do the script and then you do an improvised version. And a lot of people think improvisation means you just go absolutely crazy and start talking about, you know, elephants or whatever. But it's not. It's you're sticking to the script, but you're just putting it in your own rhythm and your own words. And it's a really useful technique. It really naturalises, because then you go back to the script and you remember the meaning in a much more subtle kind of way. And it's a brilliant technique, and I really like to use it as well. But you know, me and Steve, I think Ben sort of has said that in the past that he wouldn't have been able to make that film had we not got such a backlog of knowledge about those characters, because we'd actually been on holiday together in a caravan as a research trip.
I've heard about this. That's
which
brilliant.
Film Forward paid for. So those were almost real memories, you know, and real experiences. And I kind of think that trip was really where we found the dynamic between us as well. It's sort of, I mean, even now, me and Steve, when we get together, we bicker like an old couple. I think most sort of double acts are probably a bit like that. But it's where you find your dynamic, and it's about resistance. It's like, you know, it's conflict, which is the stuff of drama. It's like you'll say something that the person goes, no, it's not really like that. And you're like, oh my God.
Love it though. That's such a great, I mean, obviously that's just a natural working relationship you guys have got as well. Do you think could you ever see yourselves going back to Tina and Chris, you know, doing those characters again?
I mean, I think if we did a sequel, we'd probably get some money to do it. It's really tempting. I think at the time, you know, we just felt like it's nice that people want more of that stuff, and leave them wanting more, really, and not to tamper too much with something which has got nice ending to it.
Yes, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, maybe me and Steve will do another film at some point.
Yeah.
That's different characters or something.
Yeah.
But at the moment, I think we're both having loads of fun just doing our own thing.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah, I loved. I watched recently the film that Steve was in, Dark Song.
I still haven't seen that.
Oh, it's wonderful. Really scary, and he is
Really?
terrifying in it. Yeah, really good. Yeah.
I bet.
So, I mean, I want to talk to you because we talked for a long time on this podcast about kind of slasher movies, and then we talked for a long time about ghost movies, and we're now over the next few weeks going to be talking about folk horror, which is kind of a weird one, and it's quite a hard one to define. And I know recently, obviously, you appeared in the audiobook of Blood on Satan's Claw, which was wonderful. What's your kind of relationship like with that kind of side of horror, and how familiar were you with that original film of Blood on Satan's Claw?
It was actually sort of one of my first date movies that I watched with my partner.
Brilliant.
Hilariously.
Brilliant.
He listens to the soundtrack all the time, which is absolutely brilliant soundtrack.
Yeah.
It's one of the soundtracks that I listen to when I'm writing sometimes.
Well, yeah, and actually folk horror is kind of known for its soundtrack and music, isn't it? The Wicker Man and all that. I love all of that.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, again, I've always loved like fairy tales, so I sort of think it's very close. It's very akin to that world. It's, Hansel and Gretel going into the woods and stuff.
Yes.
So I love all of that stuff, and I'm a bit of a hippie anyway. So I like going on holiday to stone circles and stuff and buying crystals. It's perfect for me.
How did you come to be in the Blood on Satan's Claw audiobook then? And because an amazing cast. You also joined by Rhys Shearsmith and Mark Gatiss.
Yeah. Well, I've done a couple of things for Bafflegab now. I also did Hellbound Heart, the Clive Barker story, which I think is coming out quite soon.
Oh, great.
Or it might have already come out, with Tom Meaton. I don't know, I guess I'm probably on someone's like horror list.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think you must be getting a bit of a name for yourself as that, the kind of genre, the horror, that kind of stuff.
I love it. Well, I mean, it's great for me. I mean, I jumped at the chance, especially when I found out who was involved. I was like, this will be brilliant. If it's got their seal of approval, if like Rhys and Mark think it's
and obviously
like
they're
a good
obsessed
adaptation.
with all of that kind of stuff, aren't they? They love all of that kind of British folk horror stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So I jumped at the chance, but I love doing audio stuff. I mean, who wouldn't? You're just like, you'd have to learn it.
That must be such a nice gig. Actually, I've become really lazy in my old age, and I think I listen to more audiobooks than I do read books now.
Really?
But it's great. It's like podcasts and stuff, I suppose. It's just when you're travelling around London or whatever, it's so much easier to just have it sort of fed into your brain, I suppose.
No, it's great. And I really enjoyed it. I mean, the thing is, you underestimate like how much you're going to be screaming and crying and stuff like that, because it is horror.
Because I couldn't find anywhere like a list of just sort of credits or who did you play, because there were like a couple of roles when I was like, or even if you could just remember vaguely what the role
basically was. There's a boy and a girl who die because of the evil.
So she's like the good,
and she's the mother, and I can't remember what her name is.
Yes.
Something.
Yeah. Okay. I know.
But yeah, it was great. So I had to do lots of sort of weeping. I'm actually writing a kind of folk horror drama at the moment.
Interesting.
It's like someone should pick it up.
Yeah, I'm sure they will.
Pick it up.
Well, that's the thing. I feel like at the moment, folk horror is kind of having a bit of a moment again.
Yeah.
It was this thing that it's a weird one because it feels like it was a term that was coined kind of after the fact. People kind of lumped together. People like Mark Gatiss in his documentary kind of named movies like Blood on Satan's Claw and Witchfinder General, obviously, and The Wicker Man as folk horror. And it's kind of, well, what is folk horror? I mean, how would you describe what a folk horror is, do you think?
I think it's quite British, really, isn't it? I'm sure there are American folk horrors that, I don't know, Blair Witch Project or whatever.
Yes.
But to me, it's something very English. It's sort of Piskies in the Wood kind of thing. And it's sort of something dark and deep that we've maybe forgotten within ourselves, that sort of contradicts technology and all of those things, that there are deeper powers that you can tap into. And I think that's what's really interesting about it. It's like this, it's something we can't have a control over, that goes beyond what the control that we try to have in society.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, funnily enough, I think a lot of the, you know, I think Ben Wheatley, there's a lot of folk horror elements to his movies, and even Sightseers in a way. Just that kind of focus on sort of that Middle England sort of British landscape and that rural setting, and the sort of, again, it's there's that kind of weird, quirky Britishness to all of these films as well, isn't there?
Yeah, I think it's about sort of energies in the soil, that kind of thing. Which I love. I mean, I'm reading American Gods at the moment, which I'm really enjoying. Just thought I should catch up on it.
I've still not read or seen it yet.
But yeah, I kind of think it's sort of reclaiming our culture as well a little bit. I think I love Morris dances and I'm a big folk music fan as well. So I think it's like, if you love history and you enjoy sort of historical holiday destinations and stuff, it's like it's so vivid and interesting, all of this stuff that we've forgotten a little bit. I mean, one of the places that we set, one of the locations, you only see it for a bit, is Knaresborough, where there was this old woman who people thought was a witch and a prophet. She was like a hunchback that lived in a cave. You know, all of that stuff is creepy. But
it is, because I was going to say, you know, what is it about? Because again, tonally, folk horror is a weird thing. You know, you get, you know, a lot of horror movies that might be set in sort of, you know, dark settings or whatever. You know, obviously, a lot of the time, folk horror is very brightly, starkly lit outside British countryside. You know, movies like The Wicker Man, for the vast majority of it, it's actually quite kind of jovial.
Yes,
in a sense.
It's sweet. It's tea parties and village fates, isn't it?
And maypoles and things. What is it about? What makes these films creepy, do you think? What is it about these kind of old traditions that scare us?
I suppose it's because it's all become sanitised, and, you know, corn dollies and stuff like that we think of as being, you know, something twee. But when you scratch beneath the surface of that, it's all pre-Christian, weird pagan stuff that we disassociate from our Britishness. We kind of think we're all order and cricket on the lawn, and you scratch beneath the surface and there's human sacrifice and stuff. I mean, that was one of the things that I researched for PREVENGE, was the idea of human sacrifice to appease whatever gods to get a good harvest and stuff. Because, you know, the first death in PREVENGE, I had this idea that the death of her partner was sort of like a sacrifice, kind of like, how does society keep going? Is someone's got to die for the good of the rest. So all of that, I think, is really interesting. You sort of go, what? We did stuff like that? What? You know? I've got quite a cool book about you know, discoveries they found in marshes and things of what they think was human sacrifices. Yeah,
well, that's it. Like, our country, we obviously, the UK has we're so steeped in history, aren't we? And so much of our history that we're famous for is so macabre, isn't it? It's like, more than anything else, apparently tourists come to London to do, you know, the Jack the Ripper tour, or the Tower of London, or the London Dungeon, or you know, Sweeney Todd, or Ghost. Everything is to do with some kind of macabre.
And history is just all around us. It's like you can't get away from it. It's, you know, I mean, it's one of the things that I really miss when I'm in America, is I just feel like everything's a bit too new.
Everything's very square.
I sort of like the 1920s sort of places that you can find, like old Hollywood and stuff interests me, but I struggle beyond that to kind of
that's as old as it
find
gets.
the culture, you know, where's the history, where's all the stuff, you know. So I think it's unavoidable. I mean, I grew up in the Midlands, and I grew up in a town called Kenilworth, which has got a castle. And I sometimes say to people, that's all there is to do in the Midlands, is get interested in falconry and historical stuff. You know, like that. You know, everyone used to get drunk in the, you know, and hang around in the castle grounds illegally.
Obviously,
Like, that's all there was to do. The Abbey Fields. I actually wrote a short story for this anthology called Dead Funny, which I sort of based on my hometown. It was about the Carnival Queen. I mean, this is what we're talking about. You know, there's a May Fair in Kenilworth every summer.
Brilliant.
Or a summer fair. And there's a procession through the town with floats, and there's a Carnival Queen and stuff. And I just thought, what would be the evil flip side of that? Because I always found it slightly weird. You know, it would be like the prettiest girl at the school would become Carnival Queen. And, you know, there was probably... And I remember my mum saying, oh, you know, there's a girl in my class, and I remember her saying, well, her mother was Carnival Queen. Like, it's like, oh my God, it's like almost like this legacy that's being passed down. Like, well, what if the daughter's not pretty enough to be Carnival Queen? It's I don't know, it's sort of strange traditions that you kind of go, what's that linked to? Like,
it's very weird, isn't it?
And the evil grows quickly, attacking first the youth of the village and making them the devil's children.
Ralph, look.
Oh God, I prayed I'd never see that again.
People always love to kind of link horror, especially kind of in hindsight, to kind of real world stuff and that kind of thing. I suppose people do it a lot with all kinds of, but especially genre movies. And, you know, I've read lots of articles about the original Blood on Satan's Claw and being part of a big movement of movies at the time in the 70s that were like fear of the youth, you know, and kind of almost a reaction to the sort of hippie movement, and then what the kind of dark side of that, of what, you know, you've got all of these teenagers, you know, flower power and orgies.
Yeah,
and,
I
you know,
suppose it's connected.
The
dangers of being too bohemian and
Exactly, yeah. Because I suppose in some ways, compared to some movies like The Witchfinder General and things like that are quite kind of nihilistic, really, that are kind of like, look how brutal this world is.
Yeah, it's very depressing.
Yeah.
The ending.
This one is kind of a little bit more like, well, Satan is bad, Christianity is good kind of thing. It's got a bit more of that kind of classic, kind of quite simple folktale feel to it in a way.
It's tempting to go there because, I mean, I'm writing a few different things now and, you know, it's just useful structurally to have good and evil, and it's tempting to go for the church as like the, you know, because you want a panacea. It's like, what's the cure for this evil? Something's got to save it. I know, a crucifix, you know. And it's sort of tempting to go that way. And if you're looking for a solution in a different place, I mean, there's probably a modern alternative that someone needs to sort of discover, which is not Christianity, which is like, this is the solution to this. But I mean, I think at the moment, it's almost like the evil, in inverted commas, is almost like the anti-hero is becoming the hero sort of thing. Like things like Breaking Bad, I mean, PREVENGE very consciously. I was inspired by Taxi Driver and stuff. And it's almost like people who want to overthrow the system. That seems good to us now. So I think there's a definite inversion from the 70s. It's sort of like, who's going to come and break up all of these oppressive systems that we're existing in at the moment?
I mean, do you think that we're going to look back on sort of, because it feels like we're having a real, it's hard to say when you're in it, but a kind of a bit of a golden era of horror and genre at the moment, really. Like you say, genre's very trendy at the moment. And, you know, Get Out getting nominated for Oscars and, you know, Hereditary at the moment. You know,
I'm definitely going to see that.
It's wonderful.
Next week.
It's
as
very,
soon
very
as
good.
I can.
It's very, very good. I mean, do you think that has got something to do with, because again, I read a piece recently that in The Guardian about folk horror coming back, and is it a response to, you know, Brexit Britain and Trump's America, and again, these kind of insular isolating of communities and countries again, and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's also about small-mindedness, I suppose. It can be about what happens when you decide to cut yourself off from. I mean, I watched The Handmaid's Tale, and to me, that's horror, basically.
That's terrifying.
And it is this sort of thing of like, what if everything that we think is wrong becomes right, and vice versa, and just what we think of as being the normal way to think, what if that all gets inverted? Which is a frightening thought. And I think it is to do with Trump. I think the folk horror thing, though, as well, is like maybe something to do with the British film industry doing quite well at the moment, sort of embracing our identity a little bit more, because, you know, I really enjoy the Britishness of what I'm making, and kind of embracing a lot of the cultural stuff that makes us different to America.
Absolutely,
and sort of going, why not make that an export? Why, you know, it's interesting because I'm sort of pitching this show at the moment, and the temptation is to make it American, which I think it totally could be. But part of me wants to go, why couldn't an American audience watch a British show? It's going to take you to a completely different place. I mean, that's what I think was really clever about American Gods, is it was sort of packaging up you know, stuff about leprechauns to an American audience, basically. But, you know, I think there is something sort of exciting and exotic, maybe, to an audience about, you know, old stories and old sort of customs, which, when you dig them up again, are really interesting. I mean, I'm reading the Malleus Maleficarum at the moment, which is King James wrote this text about how to catch witches and all the evil stuff that they do. and it is amazing. This text, it is mental. It's like a manual about witches, and it's some of the stuff in it is mad, you know, stuff that you just go, what?
Yeah, that's it. And that's another thing, isn't it? It's that some of the stuff is so horrific, and yet in the context of these stories they were so kind of everyday, and that was the normality, I suppose, which makes it all the more creepy. That's the thing with The Handmaid's Tale, isn't it? That this is now the normality, this you know, horrible nightmarish world,
and something which is absolutely completely illogical, like the stamp of, you know, the monarchy gives it the stamp of validation, and suddenly everyone's like, oh yeah, you can have, you know, demons in the shape of a cat, that's normal. And it just seems unbelievable. And I suppose it's not outside the bound. I think it's the internet. Do you know what I think? It is the internet. Reality is crumbling. There's no sort of you know, this is what fascinates me about the past, because I've written a medieval kind of horror as well, and one of the things that excited me about that period was like, how would you know what was reality? There's no newspaper, there's no, you know, it takes a messenger ages to bring you news, and how do you know if it's true or if it's been, the message has been changed along the way? So what are your signifiers about what is reality? And I think that's why superstition was so rife, you know. But I think we are entering that again. We are entering that again because of the internet, that you could believe anything. Like there's so many different sources to support one lie, you know, and there's so many detractors from something that is actually true as well. It's
true. And when, you know, the most powerful man in the Western world is, you know, blatantly lies where there's proof of the contrary, and that's just then,
and then there's no consequences whatsoever. No consequences. It's just astonishing, and it probably is. Like, who thought that we could go back to that of not knowing what reality or truth is anymore? And you'd think the internet would mean more truth, but it's not. I think the whole thing should be abolished and regulated. I sort of think we will look back on this era and go, why was everything so fucked up? Oh, it's the internet.
I think so. I think it is going to be looked back at as a very dark time, though, isn't it? That's
but you sort of go look at business collapsing, people not being able to make money through various things, like things not being regulated, like, you know, underage porn and you know, just horrific things that are on the internet, and you just sort of go, well, when has that ever been unregulated in our society? It's always existed, but it's been policed and regulated, and now it's just spiraled out of our control massively. And I do think there probably needs to be some apocalypse where we don't have any energy sources and all of our iPads die,
maybe
and then the human race might survive. Small chance.
You never know.
Laughing about
quite
it.
Depressed now.
True.
And it's really interesting as well that, you know, it feels like it is something inherently British, folk horror, and it's, you know, again, some of the projects that you've done and that you've just appeared in again are these brilliant kind of British, extremely British twists on kind of genre movies, I suppose, like Hot Fuzz and what it was for sort of movies like Point Break or whatever. And obviously lots of Ben's movies feel like they're kind of, Sightseers is almost Bonnie and Clyde, I suppose, but a kind of very British version. But as everyone says, you know, nuts in May. Yeah, exactly. And Prevenge, obviously, you know, you get a classic kind of revenge tale. And, you know, is that easy for you to, you know, is there ever, do you get pressure to kind of make something, I suppose, less British and more international, more mainstream?
I don't know. I think it's sort of about using your nous. I mean, I think that we would, you know, consciously or unconsciously, when we came up with Sightseers, we kind of knew it was an American model. It's kind of a Hollywood model. It's like the killing spree and the escape across country, you know, and the joke was that it's in the UK. So that was always quite conscious of that. And I think, again, you kind of, I mean, that's kind of a beautiful thing. It's like a, you know, you bring two realities together, and it makes a story, and it makes an idea. But, you know, on the other hand, I kind of sort of knew that it would have a commercial aspect to it. I think the best ideas do. They kind of tick all the boxes. You kind of go, you could take this in an art house way if you wanted to, but it's also got enough in it that it's got legs in a sort of commercial way that people would want to see it, you know. And I think that's kind of the sweet spot to be in, really. As I said, you know, I'm sort of, I believe I've got to earn my money. If I was a busker, you know, I'd be trying to give a good show. Do you know what I mean? Totally. So I think But then it's always the tension. I mean, you're always going to have fights with people not fights, but you're always going to have pressure of people trying to make you make something that you don't want to make.
Yeah.
And people having a different idea, and people worrying that it's not commercial enough, or it's not this enough, or it's not that enough. And I always sort of feel like I've got a quite producerial mind.
Yeah, it sounds like you do, yeah.
I think this has got... I think nobody knows what the next big hit is going to be.
Yeah.
This is the thing with TV, is like people going, can you give us Fleabag? Can you give us something a bit like Fleabag?
Yeah.
Can you give us something a bit like this thing that's just been a hit? And you're like, well, you didn't know that Fleabag was going to be a hit.
No.
You were probably pressuring them into making it more like, I don't know, Catastrophe or something else. So, you know, I think the place you want to be is making something before anyone else has made that you can see is going to be the next interesting thing, or the next story that is relevant or hasn't been told yet, or the next taboo or something. So I think you kind of always trying to get to that place. I mean, the film that I'm writing at the moment is kind of much lighter, and it's a bit more sort of karmic and zen in a way, because I kind of felt like it's still got a lot of dark stuff in it. It's still pretty dark.
Yeah.
I can't help it. It just sort of comes out, but it's, but it is a lot more sort of, I don't know about seeing the world in a bit more of a wry way of kind of going, well, we are all screwed, but it doesn't mean, you know, it's our arrogance that we think we're that important as human beings anyway. You know, lighten up a little bit. So there's an element of that to the film, just because I kind of thought I can't just do another really, really heavy, because I think PREVENGE was much heavier than Sightseers. Actually, it was much more grown up.
It was, it was dark and really quite tragic as well.
Well,
really moving.
you know, that's what I mean. When I'm writing films, it is a personal journey for me. I can't help it. It's like I can only write something that's moving me at the time. The idea that's really captured me at that moment, and I can't really write something that isn't, you know, that I'm not getting. I'm not feeling the vibe. But I do feel like I'm sort of trying to channel what I think other people are going through as well, or what people are feeling and are interested in. And so, you know, it's funny because I think now I'm slightly feeling a pressure of like someone going, come on, just make another horror a bit like PREVENGE, you know. And I'm sort of like, well, this is a development on from PREVENGE. It's sort of a bit more screwball. It's a bit more Back to the Future, sort of a little bit more sci-fi. It's called Time Stalker, and it's about reincarnation.
Oh, wonderful!
So,
and are you currently writing it? Are you at sort of the writing stage, or
I am, but I mean, in the sense that we are going to shoot it next year, and I'm just kind of tinkering with it endlessly.
I bet that happens.
I mean, with PREVENGE I didn't get a chance to do that, but I think it's kind of there. It's amazing. I'm just kind of fiddling with it, really.
And are you going to star in it, do you think?
Yes.
Great.
I don't know if I'm going to keep doing that, but I just felt like it's sort of in my mind a bit of a third of a trilogy.
Great.
Of these sort of characters that kind of evolve and devolve and are kind of at various different levels of self-awareness as women or human beings.
Wonderful.
And it's kind of following a kind of a path, I think.
I mean, you said, like, you know, classically you've always, you know, the men sort of around you professionally tend to get more opportunities. Do you, obviously there's been a lot of conversations about this recently, do you see the tide turning at all for women in this industry? Is anything changing?
Definitely, I think so. I mean, I think it's taken a lot of proving and a lot of work. I mean, it's still not there 100%. I'm definitely reaping a lot of rewards, but I feel like I had to really work to get it, you know. And it is a great time at the moment. I do feel that. I am feeling like, God, the people wouldn't have been interested in this project even 2 years ago, you know, because it's about a woman and she's doing what, you know. Who cares about that? And that has changed. But I do think there's... What's annoying at the moment is the box ticking that is going on, that you get the feeling that there's a little bit of a sense of panic of like commissioners or producers or whatever going, oh my God, we've got to get a woman to do this because it's fashionable. And then you do sort of get like people coming to you going, we're not going to let you have any control over this, but we just need you to come in and do what we say. Yeah, and your name on it. Or, you know, can you come in and just, you know, be the token woman involved with this?
Endorse this.
Yeah, in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, part of me just goes, take the money and run.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, it's really interesting. It's just a bit of a balancing act. Kind of, my agent, you know, I was sort of getting a lot of interest, and you know, you sort of go, okay, they've got this idea and they want me to go away and write it, and I sort of was saying to my agent, well, why wouldn't I just come up with my own idea? Why do I have to be their lackey or something like that? And then she was like, well, you've got to work out that they might need you more than you need them, which to me was like, what? Because you're so used to sort of feeling like, especially as an actress, like you got to do it because there's a billion other actresses would want to do this role. And then you're in such a weak position that you are getting shit pay and whatever else. And I think that is changing now, is kind of people feeling a bit like, hang on, there's a load of TV shows with really powerful female leads. Why on earth are those women not getting paid? Like, presumably people want to see them on screen.
Absolutely.
I think that was a big thing with PREVENGE, is sort of just me being on the poster by myself. It's unfortunate you have to sort of bump off your male collaborators in order to prove that people might be interested in your work. But I think that was a sign to kind of financiers or whatever of like, oh, people might want to see you because your face is on the poster and people went to see it and people bought the film. But I just think a lot of that stuff is based on a lot of very old-fashioned suppositions which have not been challenged. Like, our audience is 15-year-old boys, and you're like, is it? A 15-year-old boy is going to the cinema all the time. I think actually it's my mum and dad who are going to the cinema all the time. It's like, who's actually... And I do think they're just sheer market forces are starting to reevaluate that. And it is all connected. You look at the Harvey Weinsteins of this world and you go, those were the people making the decisions about what stories are valid to be told, or what story, you know, who's shaggable, basically. That's the way he would talk. It's like, do I want to have sex with this woman? Well, if not, she's not going to be in the film. And so, you know, it's the male gaze, basically. It is Hollywood. And I think, like, Get Out is so clever in the sense that afterwards, you know, I really enjoyed it just as entertainment. But it's got a deeper message. But it was a while before I sort of realised, like, oh, it's about... being forced to have the white middle-aged male gaze. Like, if you had to see the world through that person's eyes and you were forced to, well, that's Hollywood. Because it is these execs that are making decisions about things. And I mean, this is why I'm really excited about Hereditary, because you just go, Toni Collette's amazing.
Oh, she's wonderful, isn't she?
And it's going to be a story where you're getting into her head and experiencing the world as she sees it.
Wonderful. Okay, well, before we finish, just a few quick questions I ask everyone. First of all, do you remember the first horror movie you ever watched and what that experience was?
What I do remember is that I wasn't allowed to watch The Shining. And my sister told me it scene by scene, like enacted it for me. So I felt like I had seen it, and that was true with a lot of films actually. That I'd be wide awake, like my dad would have said, you can't watch it because my sister's 5 years older than me, and I'd hear the soundtrack and I'd know that it was a brilliant film, and then my sister would come up and I'd still be awake and she'd go, do you want me to tell you what happens in it? And I'd go, yes. And she'd enact the whole thing.
I bet in some ways that could, you know, because then it's all in your mind, isn't it, as to what happens.
I specifically remember her going, and the dad is frozen in the snow and his face is like this, and me just going, oh my God, like, and the red rum and stuff like that really freaked me out. I was like, her telling me about it.
And what about, do you have a favourite horror movie of all time?
I'm a big fan of Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah.
It is great.
Aren't we all?
But, you know, The Shining, any of those ones that you can't help but watch it, you've got to watch it all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
Silence of the Lambs, I mean, God, I went to
wonderful.
see that with Jodie Foster introducing it at the BFI.
Yes, a few months ago. Yeah.
I was just wowed by it because I was just a bit like, oh my God, she's like a living legend and she's just so cool.
And her,
nice.
She is, because everyone talks about Anthony Hopkins in that film, but she is just holds
something
it.
else.
She carries it. Yeah.
I mean, talking about someone stepping outside of being that could have been quite drossy, that film. You know, it could have been like, if she'd have just been like cardboard cutout, just when she's doing that jogging scene and you just empathise with her immediately and you care about her.
And the more I watch it, the more you notice, you know, as she's jogging, all the men looking at her as they go past, and all of those kind of, whenever they're looking at her, the way they look at you down the lens, and it's horrible. It's really clever and interesting, kind of male gaziness.
Yeah, and just, again, I often say this about Alien, that like the reason that's such an incredible film is you see fear.
Yes.
And with a lot of action heroes, you don't see fear. You don't see, to me, that's bravery. You see someone being scared and conquering it anyway. You know, like Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween or whatever. And you see her fear when she's in the house and she's, you know, trying to shoot Buffalo Bill. You're like, my God, she's so brave because she is shitting it. And I am shitting it on her behalf as well. But it's just done in such a classic way that you kind of, I don't know, like a lot of modern horror films, I just don't like the flashiness of it.
No.
I mean, you can't knock a lot of those techniques, but sometimes I think people are putting the techniques into the script before they've actually made the film. It's like, you know, stuff like Kubrick shooting Jack Nicholson with his head against the door and that being an improvised shot that they just went, let's film you underneath, and you know, we're not quite sure how to do this shot. And as a director, that is one of my favourite things. Is like, let's find how to tell this story with this shot, you know.
Yeah. And you must have not really had a choice with Prevenge. I mean, you had so little time and preparation. You must have just gone for it, I suppose.
I mean, I sort of, in my head, I kind of have storyboarded stuff in the sense that I always try to keep it as minimal as possible. I kind of think, if I think we've got it, then we're moving on. I'm not going to... It's the opposite to TV, where it's like, especially high-end TV, where it's like, let's shoot it in every single frame size, with every single lens that we can find. You know, I'd rather sort of go, I think we've got it in the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, and this is a much more interesting
You're like the Clint
choice.
Eastwood of the British... I'm sure you'd love that comparison.
No, but I think... I don't know, I talked to Nicholas Roeg, who I'm a massive fan of.
Oh, really?
Don't Look Now would be another one of my sort of classic horror films of all time. But, you know, it's just the way that in the 70s, and that is my favourite filmmaking period, hands down. It's like, it was that freedom, the way that they were just getting excited about the new, you know, the innovations in camera technology, where they were just still experimenting with stuff and going, let's see how we can tell this story. And they, I suppose they benefited from all the 60s sort of new wave kind of stuff, but they were kind of bringing it, just making it successful. And I don't know, it just seemed that he said to me, I said, what would be some of your advice that you'd give me? And he said this thing, I'm probably not getting it quite right, but he said something like, you may set something in the attic and you may have, you know, written this scene about there's rain hitting the roof in the attic, and then you go to the place and the basement is terrifying. Film it in the fucking basement. Yes. And I was just like, yes,
roll with it.
This is what I mean. Like, you know, getting so obsessed with the frame, you know, there's nothing that you can put in a storyboard that is more original and exciting than what's going to be right in front of you. And if you're ignoring what's right in front of you because you're sticking too much to the storyboard, I think that's
it.
Danger.
And that's what's so, and looping it back to, you know, both your film and Ben Wheatley's films as well, it's that feeling of immediacy that they have, like it is just happening for the first time in front of you, kind of thing.
Yeah, and why wouldn't you indulge in that when you're shooting on digital? Why wouldn't you just enjoy what, you know, you don't have to use it, but get it anyway. You know, we did a lot of that with Prevenge. I mean, even though we were shooting over such a short space of time, but to me that's the fun of it as well. And it seems really sad, the idea of losing that, and I kind of think that's what, you know, at some point I might actually do a big budget film in America.
Yeah.
If my agent has anything to do with
Oh
it,
my God,
they'd love me to.
Yeah.
I'm a bit like, but you know, green screen and everything in a studio, you're kind of a bit like, where's the fun
where's
in
the
that?
magic? I
Yeah,
know.
where's the sort of, you know, where's the spontaneity, which to me is the joy of film, like that there is going to be something happening spontaneous that you capture. But, you know, never say never,
Absolutely.
basically.
Oh, it's wonderful. And what about, and finally then, you know, this might cross over with your favourite horror movies, but what is the scariest horror movie you've ever seen? Can you remember like what the scariest experience you have of seeing a film?
I actually was absolutely terrified by Ringu.
Yeah.
I literally could not go to bed after I saw that film. And to the extent that it was on Film 4, it was on really late at night. I watched it by myself.
Yeah.
And I had to phone a friend to say, you've seen the film, I'm going to be all right, aren't I? And, you know, I thought of myself as really hardened, you know, and it still freaked me out. I think it was the breaking of the fourth wall, which was so
it's
clever.
always that end. It's that end sequence, isn't it?
It's because, you know, you've got a TV in your room.
And you watch the video as well.
Yes,
you watch it.
exactly.
You're forced to watch it.
Yeah, and you've got this window to an alternate reality. And I think Whistle and I'll Come to You is terrifying
amazing,
as well.
Amazing, yeah.
Yeah, there's a few. It's mainly about the collapse of your rationality. I think that's what really good horror does. It makes you doubt your own sanity. It's like breaching those boundaries, basically, where you go, am I even watching this? That's what David Lynch does. He's sort of,
you go, what am I looking at right now? What is happening?
What is reality? You finish watching something and you go,
yeah, Under the Skin as well. I had that with in the cinema, watching Under the Skin, just going, what
sort of hypnotizes
is happening?
you.
Yeah, hypnotic.
It's brilliant. But yeah, it's sort of like, I've still not watched Inland Empire because I've just heard that it's so. I mean, I don't know if I could take 3 hours. I might have to do it in installments.
I love Lynch. It's the one film I struggle with it.
Really?
Yeah, it's a little bit like he was given a digital camera for the first time and he just experiments for 3 hours. Like what you were saying, like, you know, shoot things. We may use it, we may not. It feels like he used everything, and it feels like there could be an incredible sort of 2-hour movie in there, maybe. But there's a lot of gumph.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. It's good to have, you know, you sort of spend your time talking about, oh, God, this person wouldn't greenlight my project and they gave me this many notes and blah, blah, blah. But it is always good to have that tension.
Yeah.
Tension is good. You don't have to do everything that they say, but just to have a little voice in your head going, you might not be perfect as a filmmaker. I think it's healthy. It's really good. And I don't ever want to forget that. It's like you kind of look at a lot of amazing filmmakers' early work and it's better than their later work because people weren't afraid to say no to them and to say, this needs more work. Before
they get complete creative control.
Yeah, exactly. True. And you do sort of go, of course, there's always going to be people that will just imbibe whatever. But I'm more interested in making something that's actually good. you know?
Exactly.
Because everything's just a fraction away from being, you know, this is more and more I think about, you know, as a director, it's just about balance. Everything is about balance. You pull something one way and it goes too far, and so you pull it back the other way, and it's just about taking on feedback from all different areas and all different, and just getting that perfect balance of stuff. But you know, it's hard. It's sort of hellish at the time, but afterwards it works.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alice, for joining me. What can people expect to see you in next or see from you next? Have you got anything coming up? Any projects?
So I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say, but I've just been in an episode of Black Mirror, which was very exciting.
Talking of terrifying.
I'm in a film called Solace, which is at Edinburgh Festival. I'm in another film called Sometimes Always Never with Bill Nighy.
Great.
What else am I doing? I'm about to film Eternal Beauty with Sally Hawkins.
Oh, brilliant.
And Craig Roberts is directing. That's happening in Wales.
Oh, wow. You've got loads on the go.
I'm so busy. It's brilliant, but it's hilarious. As a freelance actor, you sort of spend your whole time wanting work, and when you get it, you just complain about it and go, I can't believe I don't have a day off.
Your child's going to grow up and be like, Where were you for all those years?
Well, she's coming with me. So
she's going to have seen the world.
Yeah, she is. Well, she's going to have seen Cardiff, basically. But she, at the moment, that's the great thing that she can actually come with. So
back to Tiger.
Yeah, I'll have to turn down stuff once she gets to school age. So I'm just sort of enjoying it now.
Yeah, embrace it. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And there we have it, a huge thank you to the wonderful Alice Lowe. It was such a treat to get to sit and chat to her. Already can't wait to see what she's got coming up next. Very, very exciting. Now, I did discuss this a little bit with Alice, but we're going to get to grips in a bit more depth with what exactly constitutes a folk horror. And we're going to have a little look as a sort of introduction, an overview to the series of episodes that we've got coming up in the next several weeks. So, to join me to discuss all things folk horror, he's a huge fan of the subgenre. He's never been on the podcast before, but it is my great pleasure to welcome for the first time the brilliant Richard Wells. Richard, hello.
Thank you. Hello.
Thank you so much for being here for this an exciting brand new topic to talk about, which is great. First of all, just for people who don't know you, Richard, tell me a little bit about you and what you do.
Well, I am a graphic designer in film and TV. As in, I do the... People, when I say that, people tend to assume that I do like the credit design and things like that, but it's more like within... I work in the art department, so within an episode of something, I'll do the thing that you see on screen that requires any kind of graphic design, like a newspaper headline or a poster in the background.
You must get to have quite a bit of fun with stuff like that.
Yeah,
don't you?
well, yeah, the variety of it is really interesting. Like you could be doing like period pieces like Paul Dark, where I like spent 5 months fashioning quill pens and doing wax sealed letters and things, and then to something like Sherlock, where you go into opposite into like high techy stuff. And so it's a good variety of stuff.
That's really cool.
Not managed to do that much horror yet, which is a shame. I did actually something that's kind of similar to what we're talking about today, called Requiem. It was on BBC a few months back, but it was sadly it was terrible. It did have strong folk horror vibe, but I got to do some fun stuff on that, like old spooky manuscripts and things, and illustrations of demons and astrology and all that kind of stuff.
Excellent.
But, it was awful though, sadly.
Folk horror is a tricky one. We'll get into it in depth in a minute. But what generally, are you a fan of folk horror?
Yes. Yeah. All of the aesthetics and everything, all the tropes appeal to me.
Yeah, it seems to be having a bit of a moment right now. It seems to be very popular again. I feel like it's quite an unusual sort of subgenre of horror in a way. It's quite niche. It's not what everyone knows about as easily as the zombie film or the slasher film, and yet there is a lot of kind of excitement at the moment about folk horror. It feels like.
I feel like The Witch was the success of that. Was a big success. And like Black Phillip's become this like mini cultural icon, hasn't he? Like T-shirts and slogans and
absolutely.
Would you like to live deliciously and all that? Yeah, it's I think that's I would have thought would have led to more. We need more stuff in this kind of vein, this slow build, creeping dread type horror, which it's right up my street. Yeah,
definitely. Me too. There's a lot of dread in these types of movies, definitely. So first of all, I'm going to ask you. This is the kind of, I think, quite a tricky question. What is a folk horror? How do you define folk horror?
Well, I think broadly speaking, you could say it's any kind of horror film that involves folklore in some way. It's like old beliefs, old religions. It's like with folk being like the culture of the countryside. It's like the old ways of well away from the developed cities. It's escaping to the countryside and fear of the outdoors. Maybe.
It is. It is exactly that, isn't it? It is. Because I've been sort of reading up loads about it recently and trying to figure it out. Because I think the main movies that people will know of, I think, as folk horror, the kind of three that people think of are those three from the sort of late 60s, early 70s: Witchfinder General, The Wicker Man, and Blood on Satan's Claw. And it's weird because it's like. In retrospect, really, it's like people have kind of lumped them together as a little trilogy, haven't they?
The unholy trinity.
Yeah, that's it, the unholy trinity. And again, that obviously, that wasn't something that was thought of at the time or designed at the time, was it?
Albert, you dope!
Hounding the innocent in violence and terror, this evil man showed no mercy in the pursuit and interrogation of his victims. He was called the Witchfinder General.
Again, what is it about those movies that they sort of have in common that links them then?
Well, I think being grouped into that unholy trinity, I think they were all released within a few years of each other, and they all they're all regarded as like British horror classics now, and they have that strong link with the British countryside. So in Witchfinder General, you've got the landscape of this like epic canvas. It like plays like a western almost, doesn't it? With this where you've got the outdoors acts as this place where you have the small pockets of communities where these superstitions are allowed to run riot.
Yes.
And the horror of communities being manipulated and twisted views and beliefs, which also get in the Wicker Man, of course.
Yeah.
I guess Blood and Satan's Claws stands apart separately because it's got a slight more of a supernatural overtone to it, but even in that, you've got the horrors like literally dug out of the soil. And,
yes. There's a lot of kind of focus on the landscape and the soil and the grass and that kind of thing, isn't there?
There's interviews with Piers Haggard, the director, where he talks about he wanted to have this strong affinity with the landscape and the textures and dirt under the fingernails, grittiness, taking it all seriously, not like he saw like campiness in Hammer horror. I think he wanted to try and do something more seriously with that. And
right.
And the evil grows quickly, attacking first the youth of the village and making them the devil's children.
Ralph, look.
Oh, God, I prayed I'd never see that again.
Blood on Satan's claw.
And again, with that one, you've got a community being taken over by this evil, haven't you? And against the horror of communities and twisted, perverted rules of perverted religions and sacrifice and
I think that's it, isn't it? Like that seems to be one of the biggest things, is that a lot of the time there's no one antagonist, like a ghost or a slasher or something. It's more the opposite way around, where it's an entire community, it's an entire village or town or something, and it tends to be that one person walks into this community as an outsider and is caught in some sort of trap. I mean, if you take the Wicker Man as like the prime example of that, isn't it?
It's like it's the educated folk from the city coming out and maybe patronising the locals and just stepping into this land and being slightly dismissive of it and then just being having the tables turned on them, and
It's most important that each new generation born on Summer Isle be made aware that here the old gods aren't dead.
And what of the true God, to whose glory churches and monasteries have been built on these islands for generations past? Now, sir, what of him?
Well, he's dead. He can't complain. He had his chance, and in modern parlance, blew it.
What?
Yeah, because the word folk, it essentially sort of, it means that kind of old, it brings about that kind of feeling of the old and traditional.
The old ways, the old ways, superstition. The country, the culture of the countryside, isn't it? And it's the stuff that tends to have been banished from our modern urbanite ways, trampled over and built on top of. And,
and the old ways then kind of seep through still. I mean, like, what is it about these kind of what's old that is frightening to think? I mean, what is it that makes folk horror frightening?
I think it's just the fear of the unknown, isn't it? It's these unknown forces that we've dismissed, but they're always maybe bubbling away under the surface, under the soil, waiting to rise up and infect us. And it kind of weirdly sort of does it I wonder if it also just kind of taps into like a feeling of I suppose it is, it's like you say, it's the unknown, but it's also the kind of, it's something different, it's something alien almost, isn't it? It's different. Quite, it's in the same ballpark as the ghost story, I think.
It is. It's the, again, something repeatedly talked about with ghosts, but it's the uncanny thing, isn't it? It's that you step into this village, or you land on this island and it's like everything is just off. It's like what's going on?
There, no one but me, my dear.
And it kind of feeds into that like late 60s, like I think there's like a suspicion of youth culture, isn't there, when she'd got to the Manson murders and that, and like this hippie cult hysteria kind of thing, and it's like, oh, maybe this isn't such an idealistic peaceful way to live. There's these dark undertones, and maybe it like taps into that kind of.
I think you're right, because it hits that time exactly, doesn't it? It's 1968, 72, 73. You know that those were it was the kind of back end of the 60s, wasn't it? When everyone sort of went, oh, maybe it's not all love and freedom.
And the Altamont Rolling Stone, the deaths at that gig there with the Hells Angels, and that is very much all part of the death of the hippie idealist thing.
It's interesting as well, because, and especially with Blood on Satan's Claw, you get the feeling, when you also look at other movies that are not folk horror, but Rosemary's Baby, The Omen, were people a bit scared of young people at this time?
I think so, it's very much a through line, isn't it?
Yeah, it seems to be, again, that kind of late 60s, early 70s, where the adults were scared of what was becoming of the youth.
It's it's usually an older person who's the hero, isn't it? Like, especially in Blood on Satan's Claw, you've got this old wise man who's going to come in and save the day from these rampant youth,
terrifying youths. Yeah, exactly. It's really interesting. But then it's kind of either or, and then you've got this kind of fear of the new on the one hand, and then you've got in other movies this fear of the old ways as well. And again, like you said, Blood on Satan's Claw is supernatural. So it can be either or with these movies, can't it?
Yeah, you get the occult creeping in quite a lot of them. Yeah,
is it people you should be scared of? Is it Satanists? Is it Satan? Is it Black Phillip? Or ghosts with M.R. James or whatever it might be?
Yeah, it's a broad church.
Yeah, it is. And do you think that? So again, those three movies, they're very, very quintessentially British. Does folk horror is it very much at its core a British thing? Would you say?
Well, to some people it is. I mean, the term folk horror for a lot of people has very specific connotations with Britishness and being that specific group of films and TV made in the late 60s, early 70s. But I think more and more you're seeing there's articles and people are going into widening the scope and discovering looking at other films that could fall into that category. And
absolutely.
I don't think you need to be too militant with the genre labels. It's fun to look at these films through the prism of folk horror, I think.
Absolutely. And I think the term folk horror, I mean, it was coined actually sort of at the time in the early 70s, but it wasn't really a thing. I think it was these last sort of 10 years that people have been talking about these movies and labelling them folk horror.
Yeah. I think there was that Mark Gatiss did a history of horror series, didn't he? I think it was that in like 2010 maybe, and he did an episode on Home Counties Horror, I think the episode was called.
Yeah. From the late 60s, a new generation of British directors avoided the Gothic clichés by stepping even further away from the modern world.
Amongst these are a loose collection of films which we might call folk horror. They shared a common obsession with the British landscape, its folklore and superstitions.
And I think that probably brought it into a lot of people's...
It popularised it,
I think so, to a point, and then, the film, Ben Wheatley's films, and then in interviews he'd be talking about his influences, and,
Obviously there's elements of Wicker Man in Kill List, but I think the main thing that we took from that film was this idea of being in a trap. People have drawn comparisons for the cults and stuff, but I just don't... I think it's so vague, I don't think doesn't really tie in if you look at it.
But it's interesting, like you say, there have been articles written. I think that once this kind of term was established, people were then going, oh, well, there's lots of other things you could label folk horror as well. And actually, and that's what I'm quite looking forward to be able to do over the next few weeks, because
widening the net.
Yeah, widen the net a bit, because you don't. Those three movies are all brilliant, but and so are some of those brilliant TV series. But they all are very, very similar, and it's nice to kind of go a bit broader and play with the term folk horror quite a bit. And like you say, if you take it as a base thing of, rural communities kind of outside of sort of urban civilization with old traditions, often sort of strange old religion in some way, and then kind of outsiders find themselves wandering in there and are endangered. I mean, that's essentially kind of what you could boil folk horror down to, I suppose. Which casts the net really wide. You've got everything, anything and everything from all those kind of more, what you might call as kind of rednecky, or what some people call hicksploitation, American movies. set in the kind of, or in these kind of, out of the way areas, or, Wolf Creek, or those kind of Australian outback movies.
Yeah, well, there's a strong I think Antipodean folk horror is definitely, I think you've got like the mystical kind of quality of the outback, haven't you? I think, and there's that it seems like that innate power in the land. And lots of films where people get lost out in the outback and go mad, kind of thing. Like Waking Fright and Walkabout. And,
exactly.
Yeah. Have you seen Long Weekend? Have you seen that one, Colin Eggleston's film? That's like a Nature Bites Back film. It's like this awful couple who go out on a trip into into the wilderness, and right from the start they're completely disrespectful to nature. They've got this gas guzzling huge camper vehicle, and they're using pesticides.
Oh no!
Littering, and then slowly there's this creeping dread of nature. It's like Mother Nature turned on them and starts to attack them in strange, insidious, creeping ways. It's really really well played, and then I guess that opens up the whole thing as to nature biting back films. Is that folk horror? I mean,
it's a tricky one.
Hitchcock's The Birds. You've got a stranger, this woman from the city going into this small isolated town, and then this force, unexplained force of nature.
It's interesting, isn't it? I guess I think it has to involve. I think in my head it has to also involve the people of the community all being united in some kind of weird belief or tradition as well, which I suppose The Birds does have a little bit.
Well, there's that scene where it's not the community though, is it? There's the one lady turns on Melanie, didn't you?
Yes.
Say, you brought them here, this is all down to you, because she's a witch or something. But maybe if the whole town had turned on her, it'd be more of a...
Or if they had all been, worshipping the birds, and they had somehow something like that. Do you think that, going back to movies before that trilogy, you could go back as far as, movies like Haxan about witchcraft and stuff like that? And again, where do you draw the line between witch movies and folk horror? Because, like you say, The Witch and those kind of sort of...
Because, immediately I wouldn't talk about Rosemary's Baby as a folk horror, but then again, because of the urban setting and everything.
Yes,
but it
has that kind
community.
It has that kind of Wicker Man-esque trap, doesn't it? That she's caught in. Yeah,
an outsider who's
Hail Satan! Hail Satan! Satan is his father, and his name is Adrian. He shall overthrow the mighty and lay waste their temples. He shall redeem the despised and wreak vengeance in the name of the burned and the tortured. Hail Adrian! Hail Adrian! Hail Satan! Hail Satan!
No, I totally get what you mean. I thought the same thing. It's that idea that kind of, again, it's not one antagonist, it's a whole group of people that you're sort of trapped with. But again, looping it back to, well, the one thing Rosemary's Baby doesn't have is that it's so urban and it's set, and it's not, and I think that is the key difference. I think fundamentally folk horror has to have that aesthetic, and that landscape,
that sense of the evil being part of the landscape, and the culture being rooted in the landscape, and to a point,
the outdoors, the rural, and again, it's like, some of these movies are questionable as to whether or not they're even horror, but they have frightening aspects. So you've got movies like Ingmar Bergman's movies that have a lot of those kind of tropes as well. Things like The Seventh Seal and The Virgin Spring and that kind of thing.
Yeah, with a lot of those, you've got the isolation, haven't you? And characters in the great outdoors, and this the crushing force of the isolation and people going mad and suffering visions. And I think you've got hints of witchcraft and superstition in some of those. I mean, you've got the medieval setting, haven't you, in things like The Virgin Spring and Seventh Seal again, which I think helps with the folk horror vibe.
I think it does.
And it's Hour of the Wolf, isn't it, that tips into full horror with these horrific visions and like I say, the insanity of being in isolation, and the fear of the landscape again. And
exactly. And actually, even The Virgin Spring ended up being remade as Last House on the Left as well, which, I mean, it isn't really a folk horror, but it has that kind of exploitation type feel to it, doesn't it? But you kind of lump it together, I suppose, with things like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which, again, many people would just say that's a slasher movie, which it kind of is. But
I've never really thought it. I suppose, it's teens getting killed, but it's not the first label I'd go to. I don't know what you'd call it.
No, I'm so glad you said that, Richard, because everyone always disagrees with me that I don't think it's a slasher at all.
No, it's not. You wouldn't call it a body count film. I don't think it's more like just it's just an experience in terror, isn't it?
It
It's
is.
just a pure
It's just
nightmare movie.
Pure nightmare, or folk horror.
Well, I mean, you've got there's like interesting stuff in the first act, especially I think, where you've got the hitchhiker, and there's that section where he takes the Polaroid of Franklin and burns it. It's like this kind of ritualistic type thing, as if he's somehow marked him for death.
And there's a bit, isn't there,
bloody
where
handprints
she's reading a book on astrology or something.
Yeah,
as well.
they talk about I think it's Saturn in retrograde, isn't it?
Yeah.
They talk about as if that's some kind of spells bad luck.
The condition of retrogradation is contrary or inharmonious to the regular direction of actual movement in the zodiac, and is in that respect evil. Hence, when malefic planets are in retrograde, and Saturn's malefic, okay, their malefice is increased.
Have you been doing those Reader's Digest word power columns again?
Jerry, it just means Saturn's a bad influence. It's just particularly a bad influence now because it's in retrograde.
Hey man, you believe all that stuff your old lady's hawking me? I don't know.
And again, it's that emphasis on these people live the old way, because they're talking about how the slaughterhouses are being replaced by machines and suing them out of a job and that kind of thing.
Very folk horror, isn't it?
And they've got in their house these kind of bones that are all assembled to look like weird, almost pagan-y kind of...
it's a ritualistic. It's a sense of it's been going on for generations as well in this. It's definitely a part of the old ways, and some kind of perverted ritual that's been going on for who knows how long.
Exactly. And then, of course, that feeling of she's in a trap, every time she thinks she's safe and she's found a stranger who might help her, she ends up being led right back in again. Just such a horrible film, but brilliant film.
yes, one of my favourites, I think.
Absolutely. So when you think about it and you start dissecting some of these films, you can go, oh, actually, that kind of fits that mould and that kind of fits that mould, which is quite nice. And of course, there's a huge tradition of folk horror in Eastern cinema as well, Japanese cinema. And I've yet to kind of see these, and I'm really looking forward to it. But I am going to be watching movies like Onibaba for this.
Brilliant film.
Is it? I can't wait. I can't wait. I've only seen just sort of images of it and the visuals, and it looks so incredible.
Again, the landscape plays a very important part, and it's very tangible. You've got the reeds and the leaves blowing through the reeds, and this the horror of these two women who in this landscape capturing samurai. And it's a very strong film. It's that, and I think you could say there's a bit of an unholy trinity there in Japan. You've got Onibaba and Kuroneko by the same director.
Oh, yes.
Two women who I think turn into cats. But they've got this house in the woods that they catch victims, passerbys, and Kwaidan, the anthology film. That's
I have yes, because I was considering doing that for Ghosts as well. And Kwaidan is it's a long old film, isn't it?
It's
about 3.5 hours.
I've not
or
seen that for a
something.
long time.
And I've got to admit, I haven't watched it yet. I've bought it, and I can't quite find the moment to sit down and watch it.
I'm quite similar. Whenever a film's like over 2 hours, I'm like,
I know.
Is there something that's 90 minutes I can watch instead?
I know. It's what I love about the majority of the horror genre. Is that they're
short
usually
shots.
90 minutes, aren't they?
There was another. I thought as well when you mentioned Eastern cinema. There's another film. Have you seen Woman of the Dunes?
No.
It's a Teshigahara film from around the same time as those. It's this man who goes out to this rural location, and the villagers lure him into this pit. And there's the house in this deep pit of sand dunes, and he ends up being trapped there. It becomes part of this odd ritual where he has to help this woman dig the sand that's completely surrounding the house, and he's always in danger of swamping the house. And whenever he tries to escape, they just put him back in the pit, and it's a strange film, but it's it's odd and like dreamlike and nightmarish. But
and that's it. They are all strange films. They are strange, dreamlike, nightmarish. When you're a kind of young, gore-hungry horror lover, I certainly was, and I remember these types of movies weren't my thing at the time, even for films like Witchfinder General or Blood on Satan's Claw. I don't think I appreciated them as much as I do now. Now they terrify me. There's something in them that is just truly frightening. I mean, Witchfinder General is just really quite disturbing.
It's a proper downer,
nasty.
Isn't it?
It's a real downer.
I should probably say, actually, the day we're recording, 50th anniversary.
50th anniversary. This is a red letter day, because the day we're recording, it's the royal wedding. But more crucially...
Well, that's what I assumed all the flags flags and street parties before. It's for the Witchfinder General.
For the Witchfinder General,
It's,
exactly. Yeah, it's a big day. Big day
really
for Britain. That's a wonderful film, isn't it? But really quite nasty.
Yeah, very grim.
Yeah, and actually there were a few movies like that at the time. I remember watching a one from it was on one of those Fright Festival nighters a couple of years ago called The Mark of the Devil. Have you seen that? And
Yes,
I think it's got Udo Kier in it, and it's
I think so.
Or somebody like that, and it's got it's got that kind of vibe of a witchfinder is kind of interrogating women. If they've got the mark of the devil, they'll torture them.
Lots of lingering, sadistic shots of torture. And I have seen. Yeah, I think I've seen. I think Arrow have released a Blu-ray of that.
I'm sure they have, probably. Yeah, there was a bit of a trend of them back then. I think from Witchfinder General.
Yeah, it's probably in the wake of that film. Wasn't it?
And let's talk a little bit about TV as well, because TV was a big part of folk horror, especially at this time, and especially more traditional folk horror, i.e. British stuff set in British landscapes, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's a massive boom of it in the 70s, in the mid to late 70s. There's so many like anthology shows.
Yeah.
There's got like Play for Today, and there's one called Against the Crowd, and Beasts, and The Mind Beyond, and these are all anthology shows with a different flavour each week, and each one of them seemed to have at least one strong folk horror episode. And you talked about Ghost Stories for Christmas on the last series, obviously. I think those two you talked about, Whistle and I'll Come to You, and A Warning to the Curious, they both have that folk horror vibe.
They do, and actually even the Stone Tape a little bit.
It's with those two especially, it's the character digging up an artifact from the soil and having this ancient power being unleashed, which is very folk horror.
Definitely. I mean, I think we you're right. You're totally right. Like, you could count those two as either or, really. I think it had so much of a kind of ghost story feel, especially Whistle I Come to You with the kind of sheet in the dark. But you're right. Absolutely. It totally does. It's all about the landscape as well. And go on.
So, one from that strand, the Ghost Stories of Christmas, you didn't see it talked about so much, but I think it's my favourite. Well, one of my favourites. It's called Stigma. Have you seen that one? It's like pure folk horror.
It absolutely is, and actually that's kind of my thoughts when we didn't discuss it last time, because I thought I'll save this for folk horror. That and The Ash Tree, which was my favourite.
Oh, okay.
Both have much more of a folk horror vibe than a ghost vibe in a way.
Yeah, I think with Stigma, it's probably because it's not based on a Dickens or an M.R. James. It's like less of a less well known, maybe, but
definitely. And weirdly, because it was set in present day, it seems more dated now than the M.R. James adaptations.
I guess, you've not got that timeless period quality, I guess. The dread of it, and it's just it's just how there's once the evil's been unleashed, there's no stopping it. There's nothing you can do, and
it's quite nasty. It really kind of made my skin crawl.
Yeah, it's just watching this woman slowly bleed to death over the course of half an hour. And that's that's set in Avebury, isn't it? You've got the Stone Circles of Avebury, which obviously then links to Children of the Stones, which is another famous series from that time.
I mean, let's talk about Children of the Stone for a minute, because this is so weird as well. This is the other thing about folk horror that I'm getting my head around, because that is a children's TV show. That's not for adults, is it?
No, well, it was shows aimed at children, but there's a definite eeriness to it.
It's totally eerie, yeah.
And the soundtracks, I think, always play into that as well. They've always got strong, eerie soundtracks, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Tend to be kind of either folky, like Wicker Man kind of soundtrack, or kind of choral in some way. And the Stone Tape had a feeling, it reminded me a bit of the music to The Witch as well, with that kind of...
Children of the Stone,
Children of the Stone.
Yeah, you've got that in the opening credits, you've got that like building cacophony of voices, haven't you? And,
And it was full of those kind of eerie moments that you don't really know why they're eerie, but they are. Like that kind of fast cut at the very beginning of the first episode where a woman is stood in the road like that, looking like a stone, It's
very uncanny, isn't it? What is this?
I binge watched the entire series because it's only about 7 half-hour episodes, I think. So I got through it in about 3 hours on a flight, watching it on an iPad, and it was quite a weird traumatic experience, the whole thing. My girlfriend sat next to me, was just like, what the hell are you watching, It's
perfect in-flight viewing, isn't it?
It was perfect in-flight viewing.
Children's 70s TV.
And I also read, while I was on holiday, The Owl Service as well, and I haven't seen the TV. Yeah, have you seen the TV show?
years ago. I think I might have seen a VHS set when I read my uni had like a big VHS library. I think I saw some of it then, but I've not seen it for a while. But,
well, it's all on YouTube, so you can watch the whole thing on YouTube.
A lot of these TV episodes as well.
Yeah,
I think most of the Ghost Stories for Christmas are,
yeah,
and all the individual episodes from the series Thriller and Beast. I think maybe Beast.
Beast is the famous baby episode of Beast is on YouTube, definitely.
Are you doing an episode? Are you going to be talking about?
Yeah, well, we're going to do a whole episode on TV horror. So all of this basically is going to be talked about in more depth. And then so post 70s, I mean, these things always seem to come, especially in horror, in kind of booms and waves. And it feels like, looking back, sort of broadly speaking, there wasn't as much folk horror out there through the sort of 80s and 90s.
I know. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's like just a general ebb and flow of movie trends, maybe.
Yeah,
I was trying to think of any examples from the 80s. I thought they got like Children of the Corn.
Yes, and that was more down to a trend of Stephen King, I think, wasn't it? It was every Stephen King movie in the 80s, you know.
And I've not seen it, but I think Stan Winston's Pumpkinhead.
Pumpkinhead,
I've seen that.
I've seen that. That's
I suppose like a folkloric kind of creature, is it?
It is. Yeah, that's very true. Pumpkinhead kind of, but like you say, none of these were really kind of causing waves. I think that's the thing.
No.
It was all about, we had slashers at that point, and much more things set in urban or suburban settings. It was very much white picket fences, Halloween type communities, wasn't it?
And running the franchises into the ground.
Exactly.
And in the 90s, Blair Witch, obviously.
Blair Witch right at the end of the 90s.
There are an unusually high number of children laid to rest here, most of whom passed in the 1940s. Yet no one in the town seems to recall anything unusual about this time. To us, anyway. Yet legend tells a different story. One whose evidence is all around us. Etched in stone.
Again, it was more that it sparked a series of found footage films than it did folk horror.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely folk horror.
And they've put such effort into creating that history for the film. There's also that supplementary film. Is it called The Curse of the Blair Witch?
Yes.
It's where they just proper well-made documentary about the history of the Blair Witch and the Ellie Kedwood and the Rustin Parr murders and Coffin Rock, and it's like this whole mythology of it. It's very I love all that stuff.
Really interesting. And again, you have got in the beginning of the Blair Witch these kind of interviews with people that live in the community and know about it and know to stay away, and all of those different kind of stories that end up coming about throughout the film as well.
It's known local folklore.
Yeah.
What he did is he took the kids down in the basement by twos, and he made one face into the corner.
Really?
And then he would kill the other one. And then when he's done with that, he'd grab the one out of the corner and kill that one too.
I know, I was obsessed with Blair Witch at the time. There was like a comic book series, and I bought up it's a really strong comic book that came out again that details the history of the witch and everything. It probably over-explains it, but
well, that's the problem, isn't it? That is the problem. I think the Blair Witch was so perfect because you knew so little. Because I've realised when watching, especially the sequels, how much I don't want to see. I don't want to see the witch. I don't want to be revealed too much about the witch.
Did you like the recent one?
No, I hated it.
No,
I really hated it. To me, it was just a bad kind of mix of Blair Witch with sort of Paranormal Activity and Wreck and a bunch of other kind of found footage movies that are better than it.
I know, it kind of felt like a basic misunderstanding of what made the original so
completely
strong.
And it was too glossy, drones and head cameras and in the whole section at the end, and I don't want to spoil it for people that haven't seen it, but there were moments where I was like, okay, this is kind of like the end of the Borderlands,
right?
With like sort of going through a sort of tunnel, and then obviously moments like the last scene of Wreck, I think as well, where you sort of
all kicks off.
Yeah, it all kicks off exactly. So I didn't like it at all. I like the Wicker Man. I like to think of the Blair Witch as its own thing. There are no remakes, sequels, or anything else.
It's a shame though, because I was when it first was announced, because they did the thing with the woods, didn't they?
Yeah,
and I was
really
excited when it was revealed as it's an actual Blair Witch film, and because there's that. Created that rich mythology. There's lots to explore. But just they blew it.
And it was Adam Wingard as well, who I actually thought, Your Next was brilliant. Almost had a folky vibe. Your Next,
he knows what he's doing, but apparently not.
Apparently not. No, it's funny, isn't it? Again, you can't. Lightning just will not strike twice with the Blair Witch. It won't happen.
You mentioned the Borderlands, and that's a I enjoyed that. It was a strong.
That's a good folk horror.
Brilliant ending. Yeah, like you said, probably can't mention it.
No, we won't go
strong
into
ending
it just in case, but wonderful ending. So again, Blair Witch, it was its own thing, and it kind of came about in a bit of a vacuum. I don't feel like it kind of sparked a wave of folk horror type movies again, but now we are back in a kind of real folk horror place, I think. And like you say, again, what was that down to? Was it down to The Witch, or does it go back earlier than that to things like the Ben Wheatley sort of folk trilogy? I don't know,
Yeah, maybe to a point. I mean, I don't know if any of those Ben Wheatley films are like massive smash hits. I mean, certainly not on the scale of the Witch, but I mean, in terms of inspiring other horror filmmakers, maybe it might have, and within the horror community, they're certainly well regarded.
Yeah, I think when Kill List first came out, that was a real sort of shock to the system, and I think it felt like I hadn't seen anything like it, or at least not for a very long time.
Yeah, it definitely put him on the scene, didn't it?
Yeah.
Baloo, my boy, lie still and sleep. It grieves me so to hear thee weep, if thou be sorry.
A Field in England, I particularly love. That's very much right up my street. That ticks all my boxes with the historical setting and the mysticism.
And again, tonally, it's got that folk horror thing of it's just so weird and eerie and creepy.
Yeah, it's just the gradual build of it and the hysteria of it.
Because a lot of these folk horror, Field in England, same as The Wicker Man, they also have this kind of silly humour to them, slapsticky, campy humour to them as well, which A Field in England has moments of as well. It's really weird tonally, isn't it?
I think that's more of a Ben Wheatley thing, though, isn't he? He's got that very odd, mixing the humour and the horror. It feels like very much his kind of vibe.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think also Sightseers has a certain similarity to folk horror. You've got the British landscape,
the great outdoors, and the brutal murder
and mayhem. Also, it just happens to be a comedy as well. That's the thing. And again, it's all part of that. You can't quite pigeonhole any of these things.
Yeah, it does. Sightseers, it does occasionally tip into creepier territory, doesn't it? I remember there's those odd dream sequences with like strange little flash cuts of like owls and things.
Yes,
and it's
exactly.
Yeah.
Even something that you'd think of as just pure comedy, but League of Gentlemen, has that kind of folk horror vibe.
Well, they directly reference the Wicker Man, don't they? I think in the first episode, where they have the Mark Gatiss playing the Scottish policeman going to investigate a missing person. And
He's looking for a boy.
Buffed her, eh? Little bummer boy. Come across your type before in the forces. You won't catch me when the chance is down.
Sir, I'm here on police business. I found this boy's wallet.
Local boy?
He's not from our town. Do we know his parents? I said we'd never seen him before. Did Tubbs do right?
You did it beautifully, Tom.
And that's the thing, and those guys brilliantly, Reece Shearsmith and Mark Gatiss and Jeremy Dyson and all them, they balance that kind of comedy and horror so well, don't they?
Yeah.
And also they obviously just have a love for folk horror.
Oh yeah,
you can tell.
Yeah, and in interviews they're very much referencing, think like Blood on Satan's Claw and those films. I know Reece Shearsmith in particular is a big fan of it. I recently saw a screening of Haxon that he narrated. And, that was a great experience watching that on the big screen in the Birmingham Town Hall.
Do you find nature scary? There are some people that just do not like being out in the countryside, in the woods, that kind of thing.
I don't find it. I work in an office, trapped in an office, working long hours. At weekends, I like to just get out and escape to the country, just to get clear my head kind of thing. And I do go on like long country walks. And there are sometimes where you've just gone too far and you realise that you're just hopelessly lost. You've gone off the track, and then there is that kind of fear of there's that existential dread of it's not like someone's going to come out and attack me, but it's more like I'm this tiny person in this huge landscape and I'm not sure where I am. And
totally.
I'm hopelessly lost.
I've got to say I am.
What's going on?
Yeah, exactly. What's going on? I've got to say I am much more of a city person. And I am. My girlfriend always takes the mick at me when we do go to sort of more rural places, because I'm a bit rubbish. I'm not very good at kind of climbing over rocks or walking over this and doing that, and I hate getting covered in mud or insects or anything like that. I'm not quite at home with it
On
myself.
one of my last walks, I did actually nearly tread on a snake and fell over backwards and rolled down a hill. And I just felt completely foolish, but thankfully I was isolated by myself. No one witnessed this. But,
Exactly.
Just eventually found my way back covered in cuts and things. I stumbled into the car park and trying to look cool in front of all these people who hadn't strayed from the path.
Exactly. Like when I wouldn't. Camping isn't really for me.
No, I did do the Duke of Edinburgh, but it wasn't I did the first with the bronze.
Yeah.
Ditched it after that. It's not. But I do like to get out and about, and I have done nerdy things like the Pendle Witch tours and that.
Well, that would be great. Yeah.
If you can link it to folk horror somehow.
Exactly.
Visit these old ancient stone circle sites, and I've been to Avebury a few times.
Yeah.
And it's. Yeah.
My worst, I mean, even watching things like The Ritual where they go hiking, it looks beautiful, and I kind of think I'd love that in theory, but actually would I? I'd probably be like that character that moans the whole way through. Watching The Descent, caving is my absolute. Never in a million years.
I don't need to watch The Descent to know that caving's not for me. It's just very, I'm not going to go there.
Not I do think just don't fuck with nature, you know.
Pretty much.
There's a reason for it.
I've seen too many Nature Bites Back films. Not to go there.
Yeah, exactly. Leave it be. So what's kind of the future for it now, do you think, for folk horror? I mean, like we say, we've talked about, we do seem to be in a bit of a place right now where it seems to be popular. Do you think we're likely to see more movies akin to The Witch or Kill List or whatever?
Well, definitely. I think it's definitely going to. I think the success of those films is going to, inspire more directors, and I think that the influence of those is going to carry on, I think, and you're obviously going to get filmmakers who are inspired by those films, like The Witch and they're just going to continue, I think.
There are woodcuts dated back to the 16th century in Germany featuring a tall, disfigured man with only white spheres where his eyes should be. They called him Der Grossmann, or the Tall Man. He was a fairy who lived in the Black Forest. Bad children who crept out into the woods at night would be chased by that tall man. He wouldn't leave them alone until he caught them, or until the children told the parents what they had done.
You could argue there's a sort of modern day virally YouTubey equivalent right now of stories like the Slender Man and kind of modern folklore that is being spread around, you know, literally sort of viral, videos of this thing was spotted or this, and there's whole kind of online web series about things like that as well.
They're called creepypasta, aren't they? I only found out this recently. I feel like an old man. I was like, what are this creepypasta thing that the kids are down with?
Me too. I've just discovered it as well. Yeah, didn't know it was a thing.
And then I discovered, have you heard that there's a TV series, Channel Zero, American series, and each series, an anthology series, where each series is based on one of these creepypastas.
Right.
And, I saw the first one, Candle Cove, which is very folk horror.
Is it?
This children, old 70s TV creepy kids program that begins to have this supernatural effect on the children, and this man who comes, this outsider who he used to live there, but he comes back from the city to this small community, and it's about the evil in this TV show taking hold. That was very strong, but I've not seen any of the other series, but I'm going to check those out. But that creepypasta thing is definitely had an inspiration in America, but
definitely. There was also there was a podcast, or there is a podcast called Lore, Lore, and that became really successful, and then even sparked a TV. There is a TV series of it now on Amazon Prime. I think the TV series could have been better because it's literally just the podcast, which is a guy telling stories, narrating it with a bit of kind of not very good animation put to it, and a couple of very bad acted sort of reconstructions.
Oh, that's a shame.
I suppose, which is a real shame. I think it just didn't have much money behind it, and I think it could have been really, really good and creepy. But actually, I think the podcast works better. Just listening to the story.
Sure. There's a film that I love that I think probably does that thing a lot better. It's from this 1999 called Wisconsin Death Trip.
Ooh.
Judge Barton pronounced sentence on John Anderson. The lad goes to the state prison for life. The father was requested to be present, but refused, saying he did not care what was done with the boy. The little fellow has no conception of the enormity of his crime, and exhibited no fear when the punishment was pronounced.
Well, it's presented as a documentary. It was, I think it was on the Arena BBC strand. But it's recounts the tales of horror, the series of murders in this small rural community in Wisconsin in like the late 19th century, I think.
Right.
But it's it's just this catalogue of deaths of like matricide and patricide and children killing their parents and suicides, but it's all shot with these beautiful black and white expressionistic. So it's kind of like Night of the Hunter kind of vibe in some of it, but that's definitely worth seeking out if you haven't seen it.
Nice. I will. Excellent. This is good. It's uncovering some good hidden gems.
Wisconsin Death Trip.
Yeah. So anything else that we've missed? Any other hidden gems that you might recommend that maybe I should watch over the next few weeks?
Well, there's one I saw quite recently. I tweeted about it, saying I'm currently watching a film that's a bit The Innocents meets The Wicker Man.
That sounds good. I'm sold already.
Yeah, exactly. You've got pagan ritual sacrifice and creepy villagers, this small community, and you've got Deborah Kerr going increasingly frantic, looking after these two children in a big old house. So it's
nice.
The Wicker Man meets the Innocents. It's called Eye of the Devil from 1966.
Okay.
And I tweeted about it, and Chris Hewitt replied saying that sounds great. And then Mark Gatiss replied saying, I've never heard of this film, so I'm calling it a hidden gem.
This is it. So, you've uncovered it. Love it.
But that's very strong. It's quite light on plot, which may be why it didn't do well at the time, maybe. But it's really strong, strange, uncanny kind of atmosphere. Like these really frenzied, edited sequences. It's almost like a Nick Rogue film. It's like these weird juxtapositions of editing and that. But definitely seek that one out.
Oh, that sounds really good. Yeah.
And there's a couple of recent-ish films. There was one that I saw. Well, I didn't see it at Fright Fest, but saw the poster. It's called Sen and Tunchi. Swiss film, Curse of the Alps from 2010. It's got this beautiful folk art type poster design, and that's it's set at really evocative location, set in this small rural community at the small village at the foot of the Swiss Alps, set in the 70s, and it's this a priest is found hanged, and then at the same time this mysterious girl arrives in the town, and this inward-looking community immediately see her with suspicion, and is she to blame for this death of this priest? And then it uncovers this folk tale of the Sen and Tunchi, which is this lonely men in rural communities who make this creature to act as a servant for them, similar to the Jewish golem,
Nice.
But and then that goes wrong. It kind of falls apart in the second half of the film, but that for that first half, and the atmosphere and the building of this folk tale, it's really strong, I think.
It was upon a llama.
Okay, so we talked about so many films here, and we've got so much to cover over the next few weeks. Where would you recommend? What would be the perfect start point for somebody who had never seen a folk horror? What's a good introduction to folk horror?
Oh, it's got to be something from the Unholy Trinity, I think, hasn't it? It'd have to be The Wicker Man.
I think it would have to be The Wicker Man. I think the Witchfinder generally is quite hard. Is quite a tough watch.
Yeah.
Whereas The Wicker Man,
you're not going to watch that and go, oh yeah, more of this.
Exactly. Whereas The Wicker Man is just so wonderful and joyous as well as terrifying, isn't it? Yeah.
Corn rigs and barley rigs and corn rigs are bonny.
And what about? Do you have a favourite folk horror?
It's The Wicker Man again.
It has
to be
to
the
be.
same answer. I often say that's my favourite horror film.
Right.
It's I'm obsessed with The Wicker Man. In a lot of my art and stuff that I do, I rip off The Wicker Man, and I did lots of Wicker Man designs. And done a poster design for it and all that kind of stuff.
Perfect. I think it is. I mean, I've got a feeling everyone I ask is going to end up saying The Wicker Man because it's pretty unequivocally. It's hard to top. It's wonderful. If we count Texas Chainsaw as a folk horror, I would also say Texas Chainsaw. But in a completely different kind of way. And what about what's your? So I was going to ask you what your favourite horror film is. So it is The Wicker Man.
It is The Wicker Man. Yeah, it's definitely. It's properly obsessed with it. But other films like it, again, Texas Chainsaw, I'd say was another one. I like those kind of wild nightmare films. Suspiria as well, I'd include in that. Just kind of nice sound and fury of it. I know you're not a big fan.
I'm not a big fan. How do you feel about the remake?
Oh, I'm
the
all
upcoming
for
remake.
it. Well, everyone involved. I love Luca, how do you pronounce his name?
Luca Guadagnino?
Yeah. Well, I loved A Bigger Splash. I loved Call Me By Your Name and I Am Love. So
it's weird, isn't it? Because those movies you'd never associate with horror, and yet somehow it feels like quite a good match. He feels like a good person to be taking on Suspiria.
There's some odd moments.
It's the sort of it's the beauty in it, isn't it? Because Suspiria is a beautiful film.
And you've got quite a strong Argento link. His regular editor, I think he wrote Mother of Tears.
Right.
And he's edited a few of Argento's films.
Nice.
So you've got that kind of connection there already. But and Tilda Swinton playing a witch, and sounds like a good recipe to me.
It does.
Yeah, I'm all for it. I'm not one of these down with all remakes types. Judge it on a case by case basis, you know.
Okay, so Wicker Man's your favourite horror movie. What about your scariest? Do you have a kind of what was the scariest movie experience?
In terms of the age I was when I saw it and the psychological trauma it inflicted, it'd probably be Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me.
Ooh, yeah.
I had I had a TV in my room to play computer games, and after playing games way past my bedtime, it'd be catching little bits of late night horror films on the TV, and that was one that I caught, and just completely out of context, not knowing what's going on. And there was a scene with Lil. It's not even a terrifying sequence, but where this character Lil comes stumbling out, this woman dressed all in red with red hair and red lipstick, and you've no idea what's going on. And
she's got the code, everything is a code.
She's giving clues to the FBI agents about what the case is about, but I had no clue about that when I was watching it. She's like this witch character who haunted my nightmares for weeks after.
Yes.
And then I probably would have got to some of the scenes where we first see Bob.
Yeah,
that's just so terrifying.
Yeah, it really got me when I was young as well. The moment when she, everyone talks about it, but when she walks into the bedroom and you see Bob stood behind the chest of drawers, there's something about the way that scene is paced and unveiled that I kind of always thought of it and was so scared anytime I would walk into my own room and the door was slightly ajar. Like I felt like I was going to push that door open and see somebody, stood behind the furniture. It's a really how does he do it, David Lynch? It's an amazing thing.
I think it's a proper masterpiece as well, that film.
It is.
The performance of Cheryl Lee playing Laura Palmer is incredible.
She's so brilliant,
really goes there, doesn't she? It's the full devastating emotion of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a tale of child abuse, really, isn't it? Long, lingering,
it's a horror movie about incest and child abuse.
Yeah,
it is. It's a really nasty, horrible film, but it's wonderful. I can't believe that it was booed and all sorts.
I know,
wasn't
booed at Cannes. Another
booed at Cannes.
We won't go there.
I suppose it is the thing about Fire Walk with Me, and the thing about the Twin Peaks: The Return is that they are not Twin Peaks. They are not jaunty music with donuts and coffee, and cherry pie. And with both Fire Walk with Me and last year's Return, it was like, this isn't Twin Peaks.
It's people wanted the nostalgia factored in there. It's like we want to get back to that cozy sleepy town, but people forget that the original series frequently lapsed into these terrifying visions and dark places. So it's just I'm happy for something to embrace that fully.
Brilliant. Well, Richard, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
It's been great fun. Where can people find you if they want to come find you on social media, that kind of thing?
I'm on Twitter at slippery_Jack. Slippery Jack at League of Gentlemen reference.
Nice, love it.
And I've got a shop online at slipperyjack.bigcartel.com.
Yes.
It's a Big Cartel shop where I sell some of my spooky lino prints and paintings.
It's amazing stuff, really amazing. I want them actually because there's some brilliant Twin Peaks ones as well.
Oh yes, so I've recently got into ink portraits. And, I've done a few Twin Peaks characters because that was the effect of the return. I want to paint these characters. Yeah, I'm hoping to get a new folk horror design up ready for when this show airs.
Yes, good, amazing, wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Mike.
And that's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening, and a huge thank you to my wonderful guests for this week, Richard Wells and, of course, the brilliant Alice Lowe. Now, if you want to follow either of those guys on social media, then you can. Of course, all of their details will be listed in the show notes. Get in touch with us. What did you think of this week's episode, and what do you think of the folk horror subgenre? Are you excited to explore some of the titles that we've got coming up? Get in touch. The email address is evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. You can also find us on Twitter @evolutionpod or on Facebook. That's facebook.com/evolutionofhorror. And don't forget, there is a discussion group, the Evolution of Horror discussion group. You can find that on Facebook. There's a great great bunch of people in there, and that's where you can discuss the horror genre, the movies we've covered, and whatever else you like with fellow listeners. And don't forget, you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Libsyn, and all major podcast platforms. And if you get a minute, please do drop us a little rating or review, either on Facebook, on Stitcher, or on iTunes. It really helps give the podcast a boost and lets us get discovered by new listeners. So here we go. Next week, we're going to be delving straight into folk horror with our first 2 titles, and we're going to be starting with some of the biggies. Now, this time round, we're not so much going to go in chronological order as we have done with previous series. We're going to jump back and forth a little bit. But the movies we're going to start with are the 3 that gave folk horror its name, the unholy trinity. Next week, I'm going to be joined by brilliant film producer Jen Handorf. She was on the podcast last series discussing The Innocents and The Haunting with me, and she'll be back to discuss the 2 original folk horrors, Witchfinder General from 1968 and The Blood on Satan's Claw from 1971. Very exciting. We will be discussing both these movies in spoilerific detail, so I would advise getting hold of these 2 movies. They're both wonderful and worth a watch. Now, if you're in the UK, I can advise you that Witchfinder General is available to stream on Amazon Prime Video. It's also available on Shudder and BFI Player, and failing all of that, you can also rent it on all of the usual places such as iTunes or Google Play. The Blood on Satan's Claw is also available in the UK to stream on Amazon Prime and Shudder, so please do check out those movies before next week. Join me then for all of this and more on the evolution of horror.